So my name is Jessica Andino. I am at the Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition. And today we also have Elinor Levin and Janice Weiner, who will help us provide a really lovely discussion here about a legislative update for bills that are related to housing here, not only in Johnson County, but for the state of Iowa. So this is how we're gonna host this event today. We got some housekeeping rules. We'll go through a few introductions. We'll do a little bit of how a bill becomes a law, just to make sure that everybody on this call is aware of the fine work that these two individuals do for us amongst their colleagues. We'll do a little bit of a background on what happened in the previous housing legislation in the last session, and then we're going to move forward on seeing what we think will be happening in this next session in January. So if possible, and if you're comfortable, we would love to see you. So if you do have a video capability on your technological device, we would like for you to enable your camera feature. It does allow a little bit more active engagement with our speakers today. If not, that's okay as well. We do want to make sure that everybody is comfortable. We do have a chat function that is available, and I will do my best to monitor it. Sometimes it's a little difficult while controlling the slides as well, but we will make it through this Zoom world just fine. So if you have any questions or comments throughout the event, feel free to use that chat function. There will be plenty of time for discussion and time to ask questions of our speakers. There is a raise hand function that is available through Zoom. You can also physically just raise your hand if you're, on camera. I think it just allows us to have a little bit of order so that we're not talking over each other. And then also, speaking of not talking over each other, if you're not speaking, we would like to be able to keep your screen muted. So just make sure that you can click the little mute button just to limit the interference so everybody can engage. Again, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Jessica Andino with the Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition. We're a member-driven organization that works with the vision of having every resident in Johnson County with safe, decent, stable, and affordable housing in the neighborhood of their choice. Many of you are our partners, but we also educate and advocate to hopefully make this a reality for all residents of Johnson County. As I said, we are a members-driven organization that provides direction of our advocacy and educational efforts. So if you would like to join us as a member, there are multiple membership levels involved, as low as $5 a month. You can do so at the link below, which is jcaffordablehousing.org/get-involve. There we go. But we have two lovely speakers here with us today that do the fine work of understanding our legislation. We have Janice Weiner here. Janice, give a little wave. Janice is from Iowa City and spent 26 years as a diplomat in the Foreign Service. She then was able to return back to us, and we are so happy that she did, and she was even elected to the city council. Then she had bigger prospects and wanted to run for the state senate and was successful in doing so. So she currently represents the 45th district. Elinor is an Iowan by choice by multiple times, right? Cornell graduate. She's been a former educator and a private writing tutor, and she was also elected to the House of Representatives for the state of Iowa at the same year as Janice. So I am very excited that they both were able to join us here today. Hopefully you are as well. And this is the point when you all get to introduce yourselves by using the chat function. It's really nice for our speakers to see who you are and maybe what you're up to or what organization you represent. So we will give you a minute here if you're able. Use the chat function, put your name, your title, and organization, or where you live. That's also okay as well. So for myself, I would put Jessica Andino, Executive Director, Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition. All right. Thank you all for engaging with me on that. I know I try not to put too much homework on each of you each time, but it's wonderful that you all are here today. I always like to start off with some basic knowledge, especially when we talk about the complexities of our government. So we have these fine folks here with us today that are going to discuss how a bill becomes a law in the shortest, most abbreviated layman's terms that I can still understand, and hopefully you all can as well. Elinor, I think you get to have this really fun job of explaining this.
I get to start us off, and then Janice is going to clean up what I forget or mess up.
Perfect.
So I asked for this one because I spend a lot of my time trying to clarify this for folks. It's not super transparent, and it's not always easy to figure out from the outside. So essentially, bills get proposed by legislators or by governmental agencies or by executive offices. Bills are then assigned to committees, and then the chairs assign those to subcommittees or choose to ignore them. So that's the first point in the process that can kind of funnel down bills. We can propose as many bills as we want to, but those committee chairs have the power to either assign them to a subcommittee or ignore them. That's kind of the first point in the process.
I would add that they always get assigned to a subcommittee, but there are certain subcommittees for committees that are designated as at least in the Senate side, as like the kill subcommittee, where they get assigned, but it never meets.
Oh, in the House, they often don't even, like, my bills don't get assigned to a subcommittee.
Yeah, so that they're on the Senate side, they're required to, but it's performative.
Sorry, cat in the background. So once a bill is assigned to a subcommittee, ideally that subcommittee meets. That the timing and the location of that subcommittee is required to be posted online at least 24 hours in advance, although you can get around that, but generally speaking. That is because that subcommittee is the opportunity for public comment. So there's an ability for people to make public comment online. There's an opportunity for people to show up and make public comment in person during the subcommittee meeting. That's also when members of the lobby can show up and give their position on a bill, particularly if it's one that they are fighting hard for or against. And then in the Senate, at least, the folks can, I believe, still make public comment on subcommittees via the WebEx subcommittee meetings. In the House,
so that
in the subcommittee, but you can't comment.
Yeah. Okay. So the Senate has. This is actually one of the positive results of the pandemic. And at least on the Senate side, they have Zoom subcommittee meetings in addition that are linked in with the regular subcommittee meeting. So you can attend the subcommittee and comment and not have to drive to Des Moines.
And we still have the Zoom subcommittees, but you cannot actually make comment on the House subcommittee. So once a bill has gone through a subcommittee, if it has passed that subcommittee, that's generally 3 people who make up the subcommittee, then it goes on to the full committee for consideration at the discretion of the chair of that committee. So a bill can pass through subcommittee and it can go through committee the next day, or it can pass a subcommittee and it can linger for weeks or even months before it actually shows up in the committee for consideration. Oftentimes this is a matter of whether we're hearing from folks about it, whether it's a priority for the committee chair. There's a lot of it, whether there are other priorities. So then once it goes to committee, if it passes the committee, it will then be brought to, or at least be available for consideration by the full body. So whether that's the House or the Senate, it would have to be then next voted on by the full body. Then if it passes the House or the Senate, it goes to the other side and has to go through the entire process all over again. Sometimes in order to speed the process along, there are what's called companion bills. So there's an almost identical or identical bill that started on both sides at the same time, with the idea that if it passes through the process on both sides, then it can be substituted and doesn't have to go through the entire process on both sides again. Then if it passes both the House and the Senate through subcommittee, committee, and the full body, then it would go to the governor's desk to be signed for. Janice, what am I missing?
There are all sorts of little pieces, but I would say that the most important piece is the place where both the public and legislators have the best chance to get a bill either changed or killed is the subcommittee level. And while the website of the legislature is a little bit murky, you can find out the information. You can find out when those meetings are happening, and they really are your best opportunity to weigh in.
And yeah, I will put one flow chart that I've seen that's pretty good that was put out by our LSA in the chat, a link to that, because that's one that I found pretty helpful.
That would be extremely helpful. As I do the Zoom, I don't want to accidentally click out of anything here. The Iowa legislative page also has a well-written everything from an idea to the governor signing and or vetoing as well, and it's written out, so it has a little bit more of the context as well. Again, I don't want to accidentally click behind and lose our slides. But thank you.
Right. The only other piece is the legislative session has two different what they call funnels. Those are two different times when after which certain bills are no longer supposed to be able to be considered if they haven't, in the first case, if they haven't made it through one, I think through one house and a committee on the other side. I can't remember the details, but which I ought to. But basically, there are two opportunities during the legislative session to narrow the number of bills that we're looking at, and that's why they're called funnels. But the fun fact is that even if you think something is dead, if the majority party is determined to bring it up, they will find a way to attach it to a budget or a financial bill and keep it alive.
Nothing is ever truly dead until we gavel out for the session.
Definitely a complex system, and it is extremely important to elect individuals such as yourselves to be able to understand that and represent us, so we can follow the flow charts and understand and make our decisions. But it's your job.
The big pieces I would say are important are subcommittees are the opportunity for public comment. If you email your legislator about a bill, it's entirely possible they won't even know that that bill exists, because if they're not on the subcommittee or on the committee, they probably haven't heard about it yet. So it's really helpful to say, you know, I've heard, if you don't know the bill, if you know the bill number, awesome, super helpful. If you don't, really important to specify, like, what is the specific topic of the bill, not just the housing bill, because as we're about to see, there are like 25 of those floating around at a time.
Yes, very good. Because I had actually created a chart with some of my colleagues over in Polk County that talks about some of these bills. And I didn't write out all the companion bills, so I just selected whether it was a House or Senate file. So you may or may not be privy to it. But if you weren't on that subcommittee, right, Elinor, as you were saying, you might not have even heard about it if it died prior to becoming available for the full chamber. Okay. Do we want to have any questions right now about how a bill becomes a law, or get into the nitty-gritty of housing law? Nitty-gritty? All right, let's do it. So as Elinor had stated, there were 25 proposed bills in the last legislative session, which runs, you know, each spring, so January through April/March, or excuse me, April/May. And some of them got passed and signed by the governor. Some of them went through their subcommittee and funnels, but made no actual effort to go to the full chamber, and then some died on site. But again, as we had stated, as Janice has stated, nothing is truly dead. They may be revived, they may be attached, they may be amended, they may be through ways and means, which is just a budgetary consideration to get around around the system that we have in place. So I have outlined these for you. It is going to be cumbersome, but we're going to let Elinor and Janice walk us through ones that have gone into law, have been signed by our governor, ones that got part of the way there, and some that got there not at all. So, as we said, there were 7 that were signed by Governor Reynolds in this last year. Take a minute to be able to look at them. You are more than welcome to copy and paste either SF or HF or any of the names of the bills to find the full description and written out how it actually is implemented today. But I gave you a little bit of a synopsis on each of those that would give you an idea of what was signed into law. Janice and Elinor, are there any of these that you wish to speak about?
I mean, there are a number of them we should speak about. Some of them aren't that big a deal. Like, I don't think the real estate broker one is a big deal. It sort of allows some people to show houses who weren't otherwise allowed to show houses. That one's not a big deal. I think from my perspective, SF, the first one, the third one, and maybe the last one are probably the most salient ones.
Yeah, I would agree.
So, I mean, right. So SF 455 is a bill that made its way over 2 sessions, basically, because the other piece is that we just finished this biennium, and there are certain bills that stay alive between the 2 sessions of the biennium. Now everything is dead. We have to start over again in January. But SF 455 was a bad bill to start out with. The first year of the biennium, it was a bad bill to end up. It ended up being a bad bill. It just didn't improve that much. While it doesn't feel like maybe groundwater and stormwater runoff would be that big a deal for housing. It was essentially a bill to make it easier and cheaper for builders. So it's really the builders, sort of the builders lobby bill to prevent cities from putting in more regulation than would be required to create stormwater drainage for a 5-year rain event, like a highest in 5-year rain event. As we all know, we're in climate change, and we get some torrential downpours that would not which if your sewer system and your runoff, your drainage is only suited for basically the biggest rain event in 5 years, it's not going to be able to deal with that. So this prevents cities from doing more. It prevents, unless they're going to pay for it, unless they're going to reimburse the builder and whoever's putting up, and the other folks involved in the housing. And so eventually what it does, from my perspective, is it prevents cities from looking forward, from planning in climate change, and from ultimately saving homeowners and taxpayers a lot of money. Because if you build these things in and require things to be built into a certain way, to a certain standard, you're going to prevent flooded basements. You're going to prevent a lot of harm to the community, and this is preventing that, to the advantage of the builders.
I will just say, from the House perspective, we really had sort of an interesting go around with this bill. It never came to the House in 2023. It kept getting kind of pushed back, and we'd hear about it, and it would bubble up. And so I kind of knew about it and was waiting for it, but it never came to us in 2023. And then in 2024, it actually failed on the House floor. It's the only time I've actually seen a bill come to a vote and fail on the House floor. About 5 of us got up and spoke about our concerns about this bill. Personally, I spoke about the fact that topsoil is not the same across our state. Between Luss and Karst and alluvial plain, we have a lot of different topsoils, and the needs of the local communities are not the same when it comes to topsoil reclamation and recovery after development. And then there were 4 others who spoke, and then we voted on the bill, and it failed, which was pretty incredible. Now, there was a motion to reconsider, and about a week later, and it did pass very narrowly, which was very frustrating to me, because it's not like the bill got any better or any different at all. So I'm not sure what changed in that week, but there was bipartisan opposition to this bill in the House all along, and partisan support.
Yeah, I think there were even a couple of the Senate tends to be more split along party lines than the House, but I think there was even some Republican opposition in the bipartisan opposition in the Senate. I mean, it's part of a series of bills that have been we're up to, I don't remember how many bills, at least 45, if not more, that have taken away, reduced local control over the past few years.
Right, which is even looking at HF 2388, the third one there as well, which is regulating building materials on residential exteriors,
Right.
right?
Yes. So, I mean, so I ended up working on a lot of these bills because I'm on local government. And I had a lot of battles with a senator from Bettendorf, Scott Webster, about SF 455. He is actually a builder by trade. And about HF, there was actually another version in the Senate of HF 2388, which was worse. I didn't love this bill, but the one that passed was not as intrusive on local government as the Senate version would have been. I actually think Habitat was in favor of this bill. The idea being that you don't want there, and I think the idea behind that may have been, I don't want to speak for Habitat, but it seemed to me that it was probably that you don't necessarily want a city imposing all sorts of design and what kind of cladding you can use and what kind of variety of other materials that drives up building costs, and therefore makes it much harder to produce affordable housing.
Brick is expensive. Brick is expensive.
So I don't think that has necessarily been the case that much locally. I could be wrong, at least for regular housing. The concerns that there was at least one major concern from cities that was addressed in 2388, and that was that this not apply to, say, multi-use buildings downtown, so that you have the ability to have some control over the city, or a county has some ability to have some control over an area that's like you have part of it's a store, part of it's maybe rental units or something, but so that can you sort of imagine the Chauncey or some other building in Iowa City that has all vinyl siding. And this was also it's also sort of seemed to be the vinyl siding industry bill, even though there are a lot of flammability concerns with vinyl siding, especially in larger buildings. But so that part got taken out in this bill so that it doesn't affect some of these multi-use buildings. To me, the puzzling part of this bill that remained in is it doesn't apply. So basically, it doesn't apply to homeowners associations, to areas that are covered by homeowners associations. So essentially, homeowners associations have more rights than elected city councils.
Yeah, and I would say just the only thing I would add on this one is that, well, two things. It was affectionately known as the Big Vinyl Bill, and I felt like I had the capacity to kind of be picky and choosy on this one, because I'm so lucky to be, legislating from the position of representing Iowa City, which embraces affordable housing and wants to see people housed, and Johnson County that's doing things like buying properties in my neighborhood to turn into affordable housing. And so I'm, can say, no, local control is really important. This is one where, at the state level, this is probably a good bill for affordable housing, but it does take away that self-determination of local control and the ability for an individual community to decide what's best for that community. So definitely a mixed bag.
Another one I wanted to make sure we touched on was the last one there. And I think, Janice, you said that's also a hot topic within the Senate as well, that relates to the law around assistant animals, service animals, and the hot topic of ESAs, emotional support animals. So what was the thought process behind this bill?
I mean, it's sort of hard to describe the thought process when it wasn't our bill to begin with, but the way it was described, I recall that the way it was described on the floor was sort of to prevent someone from having a large number of animals, or for claiming that some exotic animal is an emotional support animal. Basically, it seemed more, to some extent, it seemed like a landlord protection bill, but I don't know if you have any comments on it. I mean, obviously people are still allowed to have assistance animal or service animals, but it limited it placed some limits on it, and I have to admit, I don't exactly recall what those limits were.
Yeah, it talked about the relationship that a physician has with their with the tenant, that it has to be an individual physician or excuse me, medical care provider that has a relationship. So it can't be those I got a mail order over the internet
Right.
certificate. It was trying to weed out that.
Yeah. There was also a concern about whether the physician presenting the certification of like a service animal, a need for a service animal would be in state, would be required to be in state versus could be from license not in Iowa. I remember was also part of the conversation on this one. The resulting bill, in my perspective, was really a really good compromise. There is no ideal, I think, in this particular situation, but the compromise came down to one that seemed like it would suit as best as possible the needs of the tenants, but also the needs of the property managers and owners.
Yeah, it was one of the bills. It was a bill that got better over time.
Yeah, definitely. Does happen from time to time.
That's good. It should. All right. Janice and Elinor, do you want to take questions about these bills, or should we move on? It's really up to you how this discussion goes today.
I mean, well, I don't know. I mean, we could take questions or we can move on. I would just say, add that on like the budgetary stuff, the budgets were increased almost infinitesimally. There were tiny increases to some of this stuff. So, you know, it's better than cutting budgets, right? But it wasn't, I think I wrote down that they added, they increased the pilot program for housing renewal programs by 50,000 and gave an extra 100,000 to the councils of governments. And so that's like, it's fine. It's just not all that much to write home about.
Yeah, I would agree. We had budgets that in many cases I could vote for and was not angry about, but that didn't necessarily go as far as I would have liked. I believe I ended up actually voting against the RIF budget, despite the fact that it did include the funding for the State Housing Trust Fund because of other concerns within that budget. But there were some good things in each of our budgets, and particularly in those two.
Yeah, and I was just pulling out the housing items specifically to these, so make sure that, yeah, those that are on attendance are aware. There are other nuances in language, so reading the full bill as it went through the houses would be extremely valuable. So I am going to move to the next, but we will definitely have time for discussion. We are at 12:30 right now, just so you are aware. So these are the 11 bills that were presented but did not pass after second funnel. So they never made it to the full floor. So if Elinor or Janice was on these subcommittees, they would have extensive knowledge of the back and forth and debate between the committee members of why was this proposed, what did they like, what didn't they like, what changes were amended, what public comment was sought after and heard from. But also I don't want to put them on the spot. I don't know which what subcommittees you guys are specifically on where these passed through. But take a moment and read them. These are items that were ideas and considerations that were brought forth to the legislative committees that could, in theory, be seen again, correct?
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, and I would say what might be helpful here is if there are particular ones, like if people have questions. So for example,
right.
You'll notice there's the expansion of the homestead tax credit of 65 and older. That did pass in a different, well, that got rolled into a larger bill and became part of a larger bill. So the homestead tax credit did actually get expanded, just not in this individual bill form. So if there are specific things that people have questions about, I know for me, one of the bills that I didn't get to work on, but that I was really interested in was the mobile home tax exemption, and that just sort of languished and didn't get much play. But that's something I would have liked to see get serious consideration.
Carolyn had a comment about HF 669, which was the committee to advance landlords' authority to dealing with their tenants, including broadening eviction powers.
6 is a property law, including manufactured rental goods. I mean, I don't remember actually seeing any of these in subcommittee or committee. Some of them should have gone through.
Interesting. So this was one that was introduced in 2023, never got considered. It was reintroduced, had a subcommittee in 2024. It passed committee, but never came to the floor, but it was amended 4 different times. Interesting. So there were a lot of conversations going on around this bill in the background, but we never actually considered it.
And obviously, I mean, one of the things that did not happen these last 2 years is we did not improve the legislature as a whole, despite various efforts to introduce bills and get things done, did not improve the situation for folks living in manufactured housing and the mobile home courts.
For those that are not aware, there are 2 different Iowa codes that involve Iowa tenant law. I just want to make sure that people are clear on that as well. There's 562A, which is traditional Iowa tenant law, which covers individuals that are in apartments or traditional, what you would think of, having a landlord-tenant relationship. And then there's 562B, which is a specific carve out for manufactured housing. So I just do want you to be aware that those are not the same. They are different and can be treated differently because manufactured home owners are owners in their own right and typically then rent the land that is underneath them. So they are halfway homeowners. So just for our attendees in the audience.
I guess I'm wondering if you're open to a question.
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering if you could speak to like the overall theory of change for the Democratic Party when it comes to increasing the supply of housing and reducing homelessness, or is it, I mean, I understand that with the Republicans being in the majority, a lot of it's just fighting back against bad legislation, but can you speak to is there a theory of change on how to bring down the cost of producing housing?
I would say we're still at the point specifically with the lack of housing supply. It feels to me like we are still at the point of a lot of people throwing ideas at the wall and kind of seeing what sticks. I have not seen a cohesive messaging strategy on housing. It feels like one of those topics where if we could even get one little good idea to break through, it would be helpful. And so I've seen such a variety of proposals.
So yeah, I have as well. I mean, I'll be honest, having been on city council and watching some of the things that at least Iowa City is trying to do and Johnson County is trying to do, not perfect, right? There's a lot more that can be done. Right now with this current legislature, and we'll see what it looks like after November 5th, there's always a degree of concern that if we introduce something that's sort of creative or helpful that's being done in a city, that some of our colleagues will latch onto that and decide to ban it, as they have a number of other things. So we need to work on that strategy all with you behind the scenes and come up with something that's helpful, while bearing in mind that as long as we are not in the majority, we have to be careful what we put forward and how, so as not to have them decide they want to axe some good program that the city here is doing or the county is doing.
Or I mean, the obvious example being the guaranteed income programs that were the uplift program and then the proposed program, which you get 2 parts. One part of Iowa actually implementing a program that uses 0 state dollars, by the way, and then another part of the state considering trying out a pilot program to see what happens if you give folks a guaranteed basic income, and all of a sudden it's being banned at the state level, regardless of whether it includes state funds.
Right. And regardless of whether that's actually legal, that doesn't seem to matter a lot often. The only thing that I can say is they exempted the current pilot program because they couldn't, but basically say, well, you can go ahead and finish yours, but we're not going to allow anymore.
And a local example of this would also be, you know, when we had source of income discrimination, where we were protecting individuals' source of income, such as Section 8 or housing choice vouchers. We had that, and a couple other jurisdictions had that, and then the state came up and said, no, that is not a local ordinance you can have anymore.
That's one of the things I've actually heard quite a bit about. Now we have folks, I mean, here we are in moving week, and there are a lot of people who used to be able to rely on Section 8 housing vouchers who are now finding that their leases have not been removed or have not been renewed, their vouchers are not being accepted. And this, no matter how much the city or the county feels that that's wrong, it's been preempted, right? It's the same thing as our local higher minimum wage. It's unfortunate.
We can keep this conversation going. I am going to go to the next slide, which demonstrates the bills that were introduced to subcommittee, but didn't even get past that. So I just want to make sure that we're died prior to the final deadlines. So we can go back and forth between these, but I also wanted to show you, you know, there were 25, and I could have very well missed some. Some could have been companion bills, as I said, so the language is not directly related. Some could have been introduced in 2023 and had that carryover effect. There's a lot about housing.
Yeah. There is. I mean, I'd like to flag a couple of bills that I think are likely to come back. Either, I mean, unfortunately, some of the bills in here are the good bills. I mean, we should have passed, I think this is the second year that we tried to pass HF 548, and it didn't make it through the Senate. It made it, I'm pretty sure it made it through the House. It's an incredibly important piece for a whole variety of reasons. I'm frankly hoping, I'm hopeful that in the new iteration of the legislature, we will be able to get it passed, because I believe that the biggest opponent is about to get defeated. So in November. So I think that will help so many people if they can have their records sealed and not have some of these sometimes false eviction notices end up permanently on their records. That will be an enormous help to many people, as well as to, for example, folks, DVIP folks who have been women who've been in a shelter and who maybe had to leave their house very quickly or their apartment very quickly for their own personal safety and that of their children. So I hope that one comes back, and I'm hopeful that it can get past the next session. The homelessness one was in the works, was introduced by Senator Jesse Green. It was in the works for a long time, so it didn't end up getting a subcommittee hearing until the very last week that subcommittees were possible. Fortunately, everybody showed up and spoke against it. However, we need to really keep our eye out on that because of the Supreme Court's decision in Grants Pass. I'm actually meeting with a group at Shelter House next week because we need to all come up with sort of with a comprehensive strategy together with the Iowa Finance Authority and Debbie Durham and others to sort of ensure that, and looking at what's happening in Des Moines with the ordinance that's making its way through Des Moines City Council, to make sure that this does not happen, because it goes against all the best practices. It's really a horror of a bill, and I fully expect it will be back in some form. And the other one that I would flag that we didn't get over the threshold this year that I hope we will get over is SF 2123. It should not have a population limitation, which is what I had agreed with Senator Webster. It just didn't make it to the floor. This is basically in the 2020 COVID session, before either Representative Levin or I were in. As part of the big package of bills that were passed at the tail end when they came back, they passed this basically blanket prohibition on regulating short-term rentals, which has caused huge problems for different reasons in communities large and small. It basically means you can't regulate our Airbnbs and those sorts of rentals at all. Not even to be able to have safety regulations in, which is what most cities and towns want, to be able to make sure that they are safe places, and that a rental permit could be pulled in the event that someone is really abusing that privilege. I'm not quite sure why it didn't make it through, but I'm hopeful that we can get something along that line pushed through the next time.
Elinor, did Janice say it all?
She covered a lot of it. Oh, you're seeing in action one of.
Yeah. Go ahead, Eleanor.
Well, I was just gonna say, you're seeing in action one of the things. I don't sit on our local government committee, so this is something where like this the individual bills. I mostly have heard like I certainly am well aware of 2337 because that's something that when it was proposed, I immediately got emails about it. Right, I heard about it in my inbox, not because I sit on the committee that was considering it, and so that's something where oftentimes a good bill can go by without me doing, much to try and move it along because I don't even hear about it until 4 months after the session has ended. Now, one of the conversations that I hope to continue having and looking for opportunities on is something surrounding a tenant's bill of rights, particularly with regard to the out-of-state companies that have come in to buy some of our mobile home communities in Iowa. The reality of the situation is that currently that's essentially the only affordable housing that exists, and it's becoming less and less affordable. I don't have to tell you all that. So that's something that and there are opportunities because that's something that statewide people are hearing about and are pushing on.
And I know that's something that in addition that's really important that's not on your list that the University of Iowa student government has been pushing for a while are rental checklists to help some of these not just students but essentially maybe first-time renters so that everybody has it's sort of like when you rent a car and you have to go around the car and check off. Everybody has to agree if there are dings and other problems with the car. Everybody has to agree to the terms and check and make sure what the status of everything and what's going to have to be put in what condition in order to get your deposit back at the end. And that's something that student council and others have been pushing for a long time that we really ought to get through. I hope that SF 2329 does not come back and does not make it through because particularly with the boards and commissions changes now, which have completely gutted the civil rights. The last thing we need to be doing is pushing cases up to a commission that doesn't know the situation at the local level, doesn't have the expertise, and doesn't have the subgroups with the expertise to advise it.
So not everything that dies early is a bad thing, right? I guess that's also something to note.
So a couple other things I'll note. I was really happy. These are sort of random notes that I made going into today. The State Housing Trust Fund used to be the amount of the real estate transfer tax that went into that trust fund used to be capped at $7 million. That cap was removed this year, or was in a bill in the House. So that's a productive change. That was one thing that I had noted coming into today. With relation to like mobile home taxation that were considered but didn't necessarily go very far. Yeah, there were some good ideas bouncing around, but let's see. House File 2634 is the one that I was, right at the top there. That's one that I really would like to see. It passed the House 95-0. It would be nice to see it come back around and see that.
Yeah, there were a variety of odd things going on at the end of the session this year. I'm hoping that plus this was the shorter session. In an election year, the session is supposed to be capped at 100 days, and a non-election year at 110 days. So hoping that
I'll be interested to see if Senator Weiner and I ever see a normal end of session, because so far we have not.
What is normal? Caroline?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. I guess I've just moved back to the state, but I was following the last legislative session, and I think something that's really clear from the Senate Democrats and Senate Democrats and the House Democrats is this message of like affordable housing is a priority. But I'm curious, like, what is the behind the scenes process used by the Senate Democrats and the House Democrats to like create alignment around specific policy priorities, and how do you develop a strategy to achieve the aim of affordable housing? Like, what is the behind this, like, how is there a strategy? Do you come together for certain meetings? Like, where's the, like, is there alignment?
I mean, I think you sort of asked that, but I don't, there's not a lot of strategy right now because it's not, it is an issue, and we basically have no say on that issue until we get more members. It's something that I personally would like to start consulting with cities and groups like this to figure out, aside from lessening the burden on mobile home communities, what are some of the best strategies and ways going forward? Because when it appears that we're going to get into the majority, we need to have that ready. As it is, it's since, I guess in the House, they'll occasionally take one of your bills or one of your amendments. They literally never do in the Senate, never.
It happens sometimes. I will say, the Carolyn, currently, I would say affordable housing is something that on the surface, everybody agrees on, but we haven't gotten to the point of agreement on specific strategies. And those conversations are ongoing, but it would behoove us, as Senator Weiner said, just to be having meetings not only with our own folks from home, but kind of across those groups to kind of build some coalitions that go outside of a certain county or an individual city, because what might be best for Iowa City isn't necessarily the best at the state level. And so I'm hesitant to present a bill for two reasons. One is what Senator Weiner brought up, because it might they might go, wait, what are they doing in Johnson County, and ban it. And the other is because what works here might not work well in Davenport or Dubuque or Council Bluffs or Sioux City. And so I think affordable housing is one of those topics where we're at the point of like general agreement that we need to do something, but what we're going to do, we haven't reached that point yet. Whereas on some of the other topics like healthcare access, we have identified some priorities that we all share that feel relevant statewide.
And one of the other sort of challenges in crafting a policy on that right now is our colleagues across the aisle tend to couch some of their bills that really truly are intended to help the construction industry as affordable housing, and so it's another reason that we need to take care in crafting what we're going to propose. Because I don't want to end, one of the things I personally don't want us to end up with is essentially the dumbing down of building codes. We don't want to be using 2010 building codes. We want to make sure that people have good housing that's built to current standards, and that can withstand, and that for example, is going to lower energy costs, because that's going to help in the long run. That's built with and that's one of the weird things that we're dealing with right now, which I certainly had not expected when I entered. But there's one of the main forces on local government, at least in the Senate, is a builder, and that's how. I think it's pretty clear to me that that's his views. He's pretty articulate, and he seems to have the ear of leadership, and I think that is going to continue at least for the next couple of years.
I wanted to propose a question specifically about lobbyists. You're talking about the ears of decision makers and leaders. What role do lobbyists play in affordable housing? I know specifically the one of the lobbyists that was hired by Cicero Institute for the homeless, criminalizing homelessness bill is the same one that is for the manufactured park owners.
Yeah.
Same lobbyist. So what role do lobbyists play in the realm of affordable housing and decision-making at the state capitol?
There are definitely relationships formed, and some of those relationships have been formed over the course of years. Particularly, sometimes you have folks who are are multi-client lobbyists, like you're alluding to. So folks who are not just, you know, the lobbyist for this one organization, but are a lobbyist professionally, and they have a variety of clients. And so those folks, an entire job is to build relationships with folks who are chairs of committees, folks who have the ears of leadership, folks who have the opportunity to push something forward or hold something back. And so, you know, as I have, you know, entered the legislature just in the past 2 years, one of my kind of gradual projects has been getting to know and building up my contacts within the lobby so that I have a knowledge or an understanding of those conversations that are being had, but they do take us aside and they tell us entirely different things depending on what they want from us. That's just the reality of the situation.
I mean, there are different ways in which lobbyists play roles. Yes, you know, certain groups end up hiring certain lobbyists. Some of them are able to, certain lobby groups are able to sort of play a constructive role because there may be, for example, and I can't think of an example, but I know that they may be able to get legislation to the right people, positive legislation that they as a group, as a lobbyist group, agree, representing a certain industry, agree with, that we also like, but that our colleagues at this point would not take the bill from us, but they would take it from the lobbyists and start and sort of get it into the process. So they can play a constructive role there. Otherwise their role is really to comment on behalf of their clients, in addition to advising folks and talking to different legislators, to really comment at the subcommittee level. After that, while they can certainly have the ears of individual legislators, they don't have at least an overt voice when it gets to the committee and level and to the floor. They're still there, obviously.
I would also say there are more proactive individuals within the lobby, and there are folks who are less proactive. And so, for example, if there's a bill that folks are really excited about, and you see an opportunity like, oh, this is good for us, and it's good for, oh gosh, I don't know, labor, for example. This is a bill that would be good for affordable housing and good for labor. That's an opportunity for lobbyists from a variety of entities to be saying to legislators, hey, are you keeping an eye on this bill? It's something I'm excited about. It's something I want to see make happen.
Great, thank you. We have a question also in the chat about how to support both of you and other legislation that are in favor of affordable housing. So I guess, I know you have an event tonight, Elinor, correct? Yes, sorry to put you on the spot. I did not know you had 2 events until Facebook told me so a week ago. So thank you for joining us while you have that. But what support?
If I can't manage to be on Zoom 5 hours in advance, I'm not doing my job very well.
So how can we support? How can we support local leaders, specifically at the state level, that are proponents of affordable housing?
I would say from my perspective, big thing is elevating information that is shared, particularly making sure that folks are aware of their opportunities to make comments, whether it's public comment online on a bill before it goes to subcommittee, whether it's coming to the Capitol. Also elevating and connecting with us when you see things that concern you or excite you going on in the legislature, and encouraging others to know who their legislators are and connect with them. We are always happy to help with that if folks do not know who they should be talking to. Janice, what am I missing?
I mean, I know that the manufactured housing folks and others have done a lobby day at the Hill. It's always, if people in groups are able to coalesce around one or two issues and come up and talk to legislators, then you can request that you can look at committee members, in this case, maybe local government, maybe state government, and sort of request that everybody that they come out of the chamber and talk to you. And then it's also an opportunity to practice advocacy skills, but it's really important that everybody on those committees understand, be given the opportunity to understand why these issues are important and why they matter.
I will also just put in a plug that if you are at the Capitol lobbying with someone and their legislator won't come out to meet with them, I am always happy to invite people into the chamber as my guests, should it be, a time when it's not, if we don't have debate going on or something, and like introduce someone to their legislator, because I think it's literally our job to meet with our constituents. So.
Wonderful. We might have to take you up on that, Elinor. Appreciate that.
As long as debate isn't going on.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we have 1 minute here. Bill, sorry, you got a question with your raised hand? You'll have to unmute.
Actually, just to share some information. Yesterday I was on a call, Zoom call with the advocacy director for AARP Iowa. So I just wanted you to know what their priorities are going to be. One of them pertains to housing, but one bill is they're going to push a caregiver's tax credit. The one bill that they're pertaining to housing is they are going to introduce state legislation regarding accessory dwelling units. And of course, that's something we've been working on, and we haven't seen the content yet of the bill, but I think it's going to mirror the model legislation pretty closely with AARP National. So that would actually be pretty good. What we will have to monitor, they are working because as our legislators have mentioned, you've got to have Republicans introduce the bills and push them. So they're working with some pretty conservative groups because you get strange bedfellows going on. So here's the three groups they're working with. One is the Legislative Exchange Council. The second is the Americans for Prosperity. And the third is the Manufactured Housing Association. So it'll be interesting to see how that falls out. They are also considering an insulin price cap bill, but they haven't decided yet. So anyway, I just wanted to share that, particularly for Jessica, because we've been working so hard on ADUs. And we've been going city by city, which I'm going to be dead by the time, we get half of the cities, even in Johnson County, to allow ADUs. So I'd love to see some state legislation that moves it along. So we'll see.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate you giving us that heads up. Last minute question or wrap up from Elinor and Janice. I put their emails on there, which is their official emails. They each have their own sites as well with personal Gmail accounts. So if you look through their campaign sites as well, they have other direct contact information. But my contact information is here as well. I am always open. You all know this, most of you have my cell phone number by now, to be able to comment, weigh in, or give support to what you guys are doing locally in each of your roles of either housing or city government or school board. See you there, Charlie and Ruthina. But we are at time. Elinor, Janice, any last minute words of wisdom?
No, just thank you very much for having us and for having this comprehensive conversation. And please never hesitate to reach out.
I would only add, just remember that you all are more of experts on housing and affordable housing than we are. And just keep in mind that all legislators are essentially dilettantes. And so we need you to come to us with ideas. We are not the experts. We are funnels.
I'd probably use a different term. We're citizen legislators. We're not experts in one particular field or another.
Well, I think that this might have inspired me to coordinate a day on the Hill as well. So Elinor and Janice, you'll be helping me coordinate that, and all of these fine folks in this call are gonna make their way up into the Des Moines area with me at one point or another. I can see it now. Well, wonderful. It is Friday afternoon, everyone. I hope that you have a fun and safe weekend, and we will engage with Janice, Elinor, and other individuals from the legislation as we move forward towards the 2025 session. So thank you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Thanks.
Thank you.